Most retirement advice is built on one assumption, and that is that retirement usually lasts 20 to 25 years on average. But now, with life expectancies keep on going up, retirement might last 30, 40, sometimes even 50 years. And when the timeline changes, the rules will also change. And here's the uncomfortable truth. A portfolio that's set up for a short retirement period can become a huge risk for one that ends up becoming a long retirement period. So today I want to explain how traditional retirement portfolios can break down over long time horizons, and more importantly, how to use this information to help create clarity instead of anxiety. So let's get right into it. When people think about retirement risk, they usually think about the market, right? Volatility, bad timing, sequence of returns risk, those risks matter. But over a long retirement, time itself becomes a dominant variable. According to the Social Security Administration, a healthy 65-year-old today has a great chance of living into their 90s, and a real chance of one spouse living even longer than that. That alone can easily create a 30 to 35-year retirement window, and that's if you don't retire early. And here's why that matters. Most retirement strategies are designed to survive the markets, and very few are designed to survive decades. And when retirement lasts that long, avoiding loss is no longer the same thing as avoiding failure, right? Time doesn't just extend retirement, it extends the risk. Let's talk about what safe usually means in retirement investing, right? For a certain investor, that means less stocks, more bonds, more income, less volatility, right? That feels responsible. And for a short period of time, it is. But over long periods of time, safety can quietly turn into fragility. Okay. Inflation has historically averaged 3% a year. Okay, so every single year, inflation is increasing 3%. At that rate, your purchasing power is cut in half every 20 to 25 years. So imagine a retiree who builds a portfolio to last 5 years, but doesn't build a portfolio that grows fast enough for the next 30 years. Nothing breaks all at once. There's no dramatic failure. The plan itself just loses flexibility, and that's the risk that people don't see coming. A lot of retirement advice focuses on sequence of returns risk, which is the danger of poor market returns early in retirement. And like I said earlier, that risk is very real. But over long retirements, there's another risk that shows itself, and it's just as important. It's called duration risk. And that's the risk that the portfolio doesn't grow enough to support decades of spending. Here's the trade-off. Short-term stability will help manage sequence of returns risk, while long-term growth is going to help manage that duration risk. And a lot of portfolios will heavily favor one, but leave out the other. Research on retirement outcomes show that portfolios that have a growth aspect or growth assets within their portfolio have been more resilient over longer retirement horizons compared to that than people who have switched too conservative too early or have always been a little bit more conservative or moderate with their retirement plans. The takeaway isn't, take more risk. It's that risk itself has a timeline, and ignoring that timeline can create problems later on. Let me walk you through a more realistic example because this is when people usually get stuck. Imagine a couple retiring at 65 with a pretty decent sized nest egg, okay? They don't overspend, they don't panic, they just simply want their assets to last. Early on, they built what most people would consider a responsible retirement portfolio, right? Lower volatility, maybe more income-driven assets, and enough growth to feel reasonable, but nothing too aggressive. For the first 5 to 7 years, it's probably going to work exactly as expected, right? The markets are going to fluctuate, right? But hopefully nothing too volatile. The spending that they have with the income that they have, it feels manageable, and they're probably feeling pretty good about their cautious decision. Then something subtle starts to happen. Okay, inflation isn't going to rise all at once, knock on wood, but it's going to increase every single year. Your health care is going to increase generally a little bit faster than inflation does. And then your tax burden starts to also increase because your withdrawals are starting to increase too because of all the extra costs when it comes to inflation as well as healthcare. At the same time, the portfolio itself isn't breaking, but it's also not stretching either. Okay, so returns are going to cover expenses, but with very little margin. Any unexpected expenses means that you're going to end up pulling more from your principal, and any down market is just going to create more hesitation. Now, fast forward 15 to 20 years. They're not running out of money, but the plan itself has become rigid. Spending decisions are going to feel a little bit heavier, so they're going to carry more weight, have more burden on you. Market volatility is going to start feeling a little bit personal, and every withdrawal that you're going to make is going to feel final, right? You're going to be in your head about a lot of these things and not necessarily feel confident anymore. Compare that to a plan that's built with the full timeline in mind. Okay. It's not reckless. You're not aggressive for the sake of trying to get, high returns, but intentionally designed to allow your portfolio to keep on growing while supporting spending. Now, that second plan isn't going to avoid uncertainty, right? But it's going to preserve your options. And in a longer retirement, options matter a whole lot more than precision. This is where the spending conversation fits in, okay? And in my most recent video, I talked about how a lot of retirees should actually feel comfortable spending their money and how a lot of them will end up with more assets than where they started. And that's still true, but what creates confusion is when investment fear and spending fear reinforce one another. When a portfolio feels fragile, people will hesitate to spend. And when people hesitate to spend, they overprioritize short-term safety. The goal isn't to spend recklessly or invest aggressively. The goal is to build a portfolio that earns you the right to spend. And you do that by building a portfolio that's made to last throughout your entire life and not just for the early years of retirement. Instead of asking yourself, how conservative should I be at this age? Ask yourself, how long does my money need to work for me? And how flexible does my plan need to be? Long retirements require adaptability, right? Not just static allocations, but balance between growth and stability, as well as periodic adjustments, right? Not just a one-time decision. A portfolio shouldn't be frozen at retirement. It should evolve with your life, not your birthday. The takeaway isn't that traditional retirement advice is wrong, okay? It's going to get you from point A to point B. But with the ever-evolving life expectancy, if we're continue to keep on living longer, then your retirement plan needs to evolve with your life and not just for retirement or the early years of retirement, okay? You want to make sure that you're planning for 90 years old or 100 years old. You can afford to use your money and still have a portfolio built for longevity. The goal isn't to have a conservative or aggressive portfolio. The goal is to be intentional. If you would like, second eyes on your retirement plan, just to ask some questions or have go over it with me, I'd be more than happy to do so. I can even take you through how I work with my clients and how we've established retirement plans based for them, okay? We don't do cookie cutter portfolios. I don't want to do a one size fit all, right? You have a very unique situation. I want to make sure I learn more about you so that way I can give you a great retirement plan. Okay, there's going to be a link below. Please request a time to meet with me. I'm happy to do so. Thank you for coming to today's episode of Tommy 2 Cents. I'm Tommy Warner. Take it easy.